All right, folks, hello and welcome back to Online English Class. Hope you guys are doing well today. Today is April 20th. It's a Monday. We're going to be finishing OTN 3 today, which is going to conclude our analysis of Part 1 of Orwell's novel 1984. Before we get into our analysis, just want to run through a couple top of the week announcements. First of all, vocabulary and grammar quizzes continue to be suspended. Second of all, there's a new procedure for my collection of your discussion grade. All right, so typically in the grade book you'll see something called a DG at the end of every unit. That stands for discussion grade, and I give you your discussion grade according to the quality of your engagement in the class. I evaluate everything from your posture, all right, so how you like sort of actually physically look during the class, to your contributions, to conversations, to your note-taking, to whether or not you come prepared to class. All of these are elements of an effective participator in a classroom discussion. So that I evaluate all those things, and you get a grade at the end of every unit. All right. If you do well, you get a 10 out of 10. If you don't do well, then you get a worse grade than that, all right? So obviously we don't have normal classroom discussions right now, so what I would like for you to do is leave a comment on the video with a question about the content, okay? Or, all right, it could just be like one sentence, any point of confusion or something you would like to have clarified. If you can't think of a question, right, you can just summarize what was discussed, okay? Today we talked about blah, blah, and blah, and blah, blah, blah. Right, 1 to 2 sentences, all right, quick summary, or a reflection. Today I was fascinated by, or it is interesting to me that, or this relates to me on a personal level by, okay, a reflection on what was discussed, okay, so that could be what you offer in number 3, okay. In terms of what your duties are, right, today I need you to send me a confirmation of your reading of Part 2, chapters 1 through 6 by 3 p.m. Throughout the course of this week, you need to finish reading Part 2 of 1984. Right? You'll have your reading check confirmation of that by next Monday. And you need to make sure that you are keeping up with your OTNs. All right? We'll be finishing OTN 3 today, so you need to finish up OTN 3 in your notes as well. All right? Aside from all this, you need to make sure that you're working on your quarter 4 essay, which will be due in the middle of May, about a month from now, all right? So that should sort of slowly be moving from your back burner to your front burner as you are thinking about how to answer that prompt, all right? That prompt we discussed last Tuesday in our lecture. If you need to go back to that video and look at it and remind yourself of what you're actually working on, then feel free to do so, okay? That information is online still and very much available. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back into OTN 3. As we discussed in our SQ3R for this section of text, this is the last couple chapters of the exposition of the novel. All right, so Part 2 is going to begin the rising action as Winston's rebellion begins to take on more shape. All right, here in the end of Part 1, basically, Winston is reflecting on and coming to some important conclusions, all right, about the nature of the environment that he lives in, as he is consciously attempting to recreate his mind, in order to repossess his mind and set himself free from both the internal and external control of the party. All right, so some significant ways that he does that is in these 3 points that we're going to be discussing today. It kind of wraps up some of the basic themes or ideas developed in Part 1. All right, the first thing is Winston's reflection on the party's telos. All right, this is the first point that we're going to talk about. Okay, so in order to understand this point, we need to think a little bit about what this word telos means. All right, or what teleology is. Okay. So what if you need to look up telos really quick, you can. But basically what the word telos means is the end of a thing, or the purpose for which a thing is made. Its ultimate goal, its ultimate end. All right? Now, what I do not mean by that is like, what is the purpose of eating? Okay, you would say, well, the purpose of eating is to eat something delicious, all right, so it can be taste, and also obviously nourishment. Okay, those are kind of 2 purposes of food. But the larger question there would be, what is the purpose of your life, which you need to eat in order to sustain? Well, obviously, the purpose of your life, the purpose of eating is not to eat more, all right? Well, unless you really love food, okay? But the purpose of being alive is going to, as a human being, right, we have this ability to connect our meditations on telos to larger abstractions, larger universal concepts, okay? So, for example, someone who is of the Christian belief system would say, what is the purpose of a Christian's life? And referencing the Westminster Confession of Faith, they might say, well, the purpose of a human being's life, the reason why they are in existence, why they are here, is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. All right, that's what the Westminster Confession summarizes as the telos of the human existence. All right. Now, obviously, those kinds of questions vary according to individuals' belief systems, but uniquely are specific only to human beings. Only humans can consider consciously telos, all right? All things can have a telos, but only human beings created in the image of God can meditate on telos. No other living entity is able to self-consciously evaluate the purpose of its existence, self-consciously evaluate its end goals or its purpose for existing. For example, a dog, a cow, the grass, a tree. None of those things are capable of self-consciously saying, what is the purpose of my existence? Of course, they can have smaller goals, right? Like a dog can want to eat breakfast or want to go on a walk. But a dog is not even capable, does not even have the raw materials, right? Because it does not have language to consider the kind of question like, for example, what is the purpose of my existence existentially? All right? So that is a teleological or a question of telos. It's a question that only humans can ask. And it's a question, all right, that is most easily embodied by the word why. All right? Not what a thing is or not how a thing works, but why it exists, all right? Why the purpose that it is designed for, okay? So let's think about the significance of Winston's reflections on the parties, telos, what it means that he is asking that question, all right? So on page 77 and 78, Winston is reflecting on, as he does all throughout the course of part one, the ways in which or how the party exerts control over its citizens' notions of truth or reality. Okay, and one of the significant ways that they do that is by controlling records or controlling history. And one time, Winston remembers holding documentary evidence that the party was lying, that the party had published records that defied other records. Okay? In other words, the party is lying. Therefore, the party is not unimpeachably perfect. Therefore, the party is capable of making mistakes. And if capable of making mistakes, capable of being overthrown. All right? They are vulnerable. They are simply a human institution, not, as they attempt to posture themselves, eternal, ever-present controllers of metaphysical realities. All right? Totalitarian dictators. Okay? But Winston had to throw this away. All right? It goes away. And the only place that the memory of their imperfection lives now is in his own mind, which, as we already know, is feeble, capable of making mistakes, and also temporal. It's passing away. The records will stand, he will pass away, and therefore, right, the party's control or the party's seeming perfection will continue as a historical reality despite Winston's memory. Okay? Hence his writing of the journal, a record of the party's imperfections and injustices and insanities. Okay? So, as Winston is recording these things, Winston's thought crime takes one step further. Winston's thought crime gets one step more sophisticated. He writes, but today, supposing that it could be somehow resurrected from its ashes, talking about the photograph that proved that Rutherford, Aronson, and Jones were actually places where the party said that they were not. The photograph might not even be evidence. Already at the time when he made his discovery, Oceania was no longer at war with Eurasia. And it might have been to the agents of Eurasia that the three dead men had betrayed their country. Since then, there had been other changes. 2, 3, he could not remember how many. Very likely the confessions had been rewritten and rewritten until the original facts and dates no longer had the smallest significance. The past not only changed, but it changed continuously. What most afflicted him with the sense of nightmare was that he had never clearly understood, important word here, why the huge imposture was undertaken. The immediate advantages of falsifying the past were obvious. In other words, the purposes, the immediate advantages of doing this to control the citizens' minds make sense. It helps solidify their control. But the ultimate motive, the ultimate motive was mysterious. Why do all this? What is the point of such a massive undertaking in order to control political power? Is political power that important? Well, why? He then took up his pen again and he wrote, importantly, I understand how, but I do not understand why. This points to another kind of a deeper sort of dystopian reality in the setting, and that is that the party denies their citizens a clear understanding and even the ability to meditate on the telos of their nation, their community and their lives. They are denied the opportunity to ask and answer coherently this fundamental question. So what I mean to say is that meditating on telos, answering questions of why, is an essential human right. You as a human being were made distinctly to ask and answer this question, why? For example, why are you being educated? What is the telos of your education? Well, you might have multiple answers to that question. If the telos of your education is for you to get rich, then it follows that everything that isn't directly related to you getting rich is a waste of your time. Some of you functionally believe that, and so that's why you think that reading poems is a waste of your time. It's not going to get me rich, so what am I doing? What am I doing it for? Well, if you reevaluate your telos and you think, well, the purpose of my education is to pursue knowledge of the truth, to pursue knowledge of God's creation. Well, suddenly, studying things that are not directly related to you getting rich start to make a whole lot of sense, because, frankly, if your education is purposed toward your understanding of truth, not all truth is going to lead to you getting rich. Not all truth can be commodified. So in other words, evaluating telos is something that is distinctly human and something that you have a right to do and something that you need to do. It'd be like the reason why it'd be so intolerable for you to live your life digging a hole and filling it back up again over and over again. Sure, that'd be hard work. You'd be working your tail off. No one could accuse you of laziness, but you'd go insane if you were forced to do that every day of your life, because that work is meaningless. It has no end. It's not connected to any kind of actual real goal that is related to your belief system. So in other words, a human being has a right to know the telos of the things that they do, the end of their education, the end of the existence of your family, the end of the existence of your nation, what makes your nation worth. loving, serving, protecting? Is it really? Does it actually align with a cogent answer of the question, why does this entity exist? Okay? So when the party denies its citizens the opportunity to ask and coherently answer the question why, right, they are denying them a very basic element of their humanity. It is dehumanizing to exist in an environment that forbids you to think about the purpose of your existence. All right. Moreover, what does the party require you to do? Well, it requires you to give everything, your heart, your mind, your body, everything in service of the party. All of your time, all of your efforts, all of your work, all of your labor, all of your beliefs, all of your reasoning to the party. But you don't get to know why, which requires doublethink. You have to forget that you forgot that it is intolerable to sacrifice everything that you have for something that you do not believe in and something that you cannot believe in, because you're not allowed to conscientiously think about it. It's not based on principles, all right, that are discernible. In other words, Oceana and the party deny their citizens the opportunity to meditate on teleological questions. Why? All right, the why is not clear. Okay? Winston is rebelling simply by recognizing that this isn't right. Okay? That is a rebellion in and of itself. It's a thought crime in and of itself to reckon with the fact that this isn't right. Okay? Okay, second point that we want to pay attention to, all right, is the significance of Winston's summary of intellectual freedom. Okay? So, as Winston continues to commit thought crime and to think about and to desire freedom, intellectual freedom from the party's dominion, all right, he offers a very simple definition of what it means to be intellectually free. All right, so he says, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. His heart sank as he thought of the enormous power arrayed against him, the ease with which any party intellectual would overthrow him in debate, the subtle arguments which he would not be able to understand, much less answer. And yet he was in the right. They were wrong, and he was right. The obvious, the silly, and the true had got to be defended. Truisms are true. Hold on to that. The solid world exists. Its laws do not change. Stones are hard. Water is wet. Objects unsupported fall toward the earth's center, with the feeling that he was speaking to O'Brien and also that he was setting forth an important axiom. He wrote, freedom is the freedom. Okay, freedom, all forms of freedom, the basic essence of freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. All right. Now, what this means, all right, is that Winston has reckoned with the insanity of the party's control over how to know a thing. All right. And what Winston defines as freedom, what freedom basically means, is being able to, in your own mind, think a thought like 2 + 2 = 4, and using your observation of the environment that you compare, okay, to a kind of historical context to establish a kind of truism. All right, and again, he says truisms are true. A kind of truism, a kind of universal truth that reflects reality. That 2 is 2, and adding 2 together to another 2 leads to 4, and that is always true, no matter what the party says, no matter what anyone says, it's true. All right, and that one's mind is capable of observing that reality and knowing that is true. Okay, so you can compare what you believe to be true right now with what has been true over time, and then draw conclusions about what is true for all time, what you believe in. All right, what is truly good, truly just, follows after All right, these simple abilities to say things like this, 2 plus 2 equals 4, okay? So, what Winston is reckoning with, the significant thing that Winston has realized in saying this, is that in the end, what the party is trying to do to its citizens is strip them of their ability to understand universal truth apart from submission to their dictates. Okay? They don't get to, like a human being, believe. They don't get to, like a human being, use their senses, use their minds to attempt to understand and develop a notion of what is true right now, what has been true over time, and how that leads to a cogent understanding of what is eternally or universally true. Okay? Rather, the party reverses this process and simply says, we are in control of your environment right now. We are in control of history, and we are in control of reality. Why? Because we say so. Prove us wrong. You can't prove us wrong. So therefore, we are right. And we get to say what 2 equals. We get to say if 2 plus 2 equals 4. And if we say that it doesn't, then it doesn't. All right? Winston's simple articulation that 2 plus 2 equals 4, and if he is allowed to believe that in his own private mind, if he's able to say that that is true in his own private heart, apart from the control of the party, apart from the dictates of the party, then he is free. Okay? Then he is free. Then they do not have, the party does not have control over him. They do not have control over his notions of reality. Okay? Basically, right, what Winston is doing when he reflects on that reality, okay, his conscious reflection on that reality is itself a thought crime, because he is refusing to subordinate his senses, his reasoning ability, to the dictates of the party. In the end, that's what the party requires. Subordinating your reasoning, your ability to think and believe to whatever they say. Okay? Asserting the fact that they are in control of metaphysical realities. Okay? All right, this is different than, say, a person of faith, all right, who would say that God, who is in control of metaphysical realities, shapes our understanding of history and shapes our understanding of the ways that we observe our environment, and therefore shapes our understandings of truth. When we assert that God does that, right, we do so as believers, as people of faith, which is a conscientious form of submission. Yes, of course, in the Reformed tradition, it is a gift, okay, but it is a gift that is responded to freely. It is a gift that is responded to by the individual. One obeys the call to believe. Right? The party does not want that. They do not want you to obey a call, because obeying is a choice that empowers the individual. Okay? What they want is you to consciously induce yourself into unconscious submission, a kind of vegetative state in which you forget to ask questions like why, in which you forget to ask questions like how, all right, in which you forget to ask questions at all. Okay? All right, last point that we want to talk about is, at the end of part 1, a kind of culmination of Winston's rebellion is indicated and dramatized for us by his purchase of the glass paperweight. Okay, let's go ahead and turn to page 95. Winston goes to a consignment shop in the Prole district, and he buys what is described as a, quote, heavy lump of glass, curved on one side, all right, flat on the other, making almost a hemisphere. Okay, so that language evokes a sense that this little lump of glass looks to Winston like it is a kind of world, of its own, right? And very much like the earth, it has a hemisphere around it. There was a peculiar softness as of rainwater in both the color and the texture of the glass. Okay, in other words, it is transparent. You can see through it. At the heart of it, okay, so that language, heart of it, magnified by the curved surface, there was a strange pink, convoluted object that recalled a rose or a sea anemone. Okay, and this convoluted object that looks like a rose or looks like a sea anemone becomes this kind of symbol that is at the heart of this little glass, this piece of glass that is sort of protected, hemmed in. It is has a kind of hemisphere it's this heavy lump of glass. It's a paperweight that's meant to hold down things. It has a kind of gravity to it, right? This is a symbol of Winston's mind and heart. His growing belief that his mind and his heart are his and that he can investigate them, analyze them. Notice the transparency of the glass. And that he can begin to disentangle its convolution. That this strange pink object that has been sort of controlled by the party is something that he is reclaiming, something that he is recalling to his mind as he analyzes it and thinks about it, okay? And Winston buys this object, this clearly symbolic object, all right, and he calls it a beautiful thing when he buys it. And Mr. Charrington, the man whom he is buying it from, responds by reiterating, yes, it is indeed a beautiful thing. Okay? So here, Winston's purchase of the glass paperweight is representative of his kind of increasing intellectual and internal freedom. It's kind of a culmination of all that he's been working toward, a kind of embodiment of all that he's been working toward in part one, which is this attempt to reclaim his mind from the insanity of the party's control. All right. Note the fact that when he calls it a beautiful thing, it affirms that Winston has developed his own independent aesthetic sense. Now, an aesthetic sense is just a sense of, and again, something that only human beings have. It's a sense of that which is beautiful. All right, it's right. Your aesthetic sense is sort of what makes you dress a certain way, right? Like you've got a certain look that you go for. Well, that's just a reflection of your own independent aesthetic sense. All right, and that's cool. That's cool that human beings get to do that. It's cool that they get to express their sense of beauty, all right, by adorning themselves in certain ways. It is a reflection of what you value or view as good, cool, beautiful. Here, Winston is expressing his own independent ability to have developed an aesthetic sense. He takes pleasure in the paperweight's beauty. Okay, a kind of pleasure that is separate from and outside of the control of the party. Very much like the ensconced heart or the ensconced sea anemone, this strange pink convoluted object at the heart of this hemispheric glass, right? He, right, very much like the object that he has bought, is expressing his ability, okay, expressing his desire to delight in and value things that he has set his affections on. All right, he is again recovering his ability to believe, to think, to value, to love. All right, and something that he is increasingly believing is protected from, ensconced from the infection of the party's poisonous control. All right, so he delights in it. He not only believes or thinks that it's valuable, which is something that you do with your brain, he delights in it. All right, it's a kind of emotional experience that is associated with love. He values it. All right, he's willing to sacrifice for it. I mean, on a small way, he buys it. It's like $4, so that's not a big sacrifice. But he's literally he's putting his life at stake when he buys this thing, okay? So yeah, it's got a cheap price, but also a very hefty one, okay, in another sense. So, in other words, Winston, the purchase of the paperweight is a kind of bringing together of Winston's mind and his heart that are both functioning independent of the party's value system. Okay, he buys an object that he has judged, that's something you do with your brain, judged to be valuable, all right, and something that he delights in with his heart. Okay, after sort of engaging with it, observing it, analyzing it, which is something that he does with his brain, he deems it valuable, he adores it, he wants it, he delights in it, he deems it beautiful. Okay, he's exercising his right to act in accordance with independently constructed evaluations of his environment, specifically the paperweight. All right. So this is an expression of Winston's freedom. Okay, an act that sort of culminates in or illustrates the ways in which Winston has attempted to set his mind and heart free of the control of the party and to build a kind of internal world, a kind of hemisphere for himself where he is truly free, okay, where he can think thoughts like 2 + 2 = 4, and this hemisphere of glass is beautiful. He can think those thoughts freely and act in accordance with those beliefs, which is the essence of what it means to be free, and also part of what is at the core of what it means to be human. Okay, to be able to believe, to be able to construct a worldview, and to be able to act in accordance with those beliefs and that worldview. All right. We will see where this takes Winston in part 2, how he continues his rebellion against the party's control of his mind and his heart, and his attempt to protect it in a hemisphere, to analyze it in the transparent glass embodied by the paperweight. Have a great day.